My name is Sydney Linscott, and my literature review and presentation today are over the topic of food deserts and the debate of whether or not they actually exist. The term food desert actually started in the 1990s, and it was said to have originated in Scotland. It can be defined as an area characterized by poor access to healthy and affordable food. The existence of food deserts is actually still widely debated, even though the term has been around for several decades. Although the term food deserts can mean a literal absence of retail food in a defined area, the recent studies of food deserts more commonly assess differential accessibility to healthy and affordable foods between socioeconomically advantaged and disadvantaged areas. The main study that I focused on was a systematic review of food deserts. It was done by Julie Bulak, Elizabeth Christiansen, and Stephen Cummins. They reviewed research studies from the years 1966 to 2007. Despite the interest in food deserts over the past few years, there have been no systematic review of them at all whatsoever until these researchers came in. Bulak, Christiansen, and Cummins addressed this gap by systematically reviewing the evidence for food deserts, specifically in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas. Their methods included quantitative studies from high-income countries, and if they compared to two or more geographic areas that differed by socioeconomic indicators of disadvantage, and for market basket comparisons, involved more than one type of food. They considered market basket studies that compared a selection of food items across areas and stores in terms of availability, variety, price, or quality. For geographic studies, they compared the accessibility of different types of food and food stores, and studies that combine geographic and market basket approaches together. They also allowed both random sampling and non-random sampling. And they also excluded studies that compared pre-identified food deserts, investigated change as a function of time or intervention, and studies that did not involve food retail stores like restaurants or fast food stops. Their results, they had nearly 3,000 studies just on food deserts, but after they weeded some out, they were down to 106 studies. And after a very detailed inspection of those studies, 57 of those were excluded and 49 studies were used. Of the 49 included studies, 22 were market basket studies, 17 were geographic studies, and 10 were mixed method studies. 34 of these studies were conducted in the US, while 5 were in the United Kingdom, 6 in Canada, 3 in Australia, and 1 in New Zealand. Although I didn't really focus on the market basket studies, the results were actually pretty mixed, and they didn't give a very clear indication whether or not food prices in different areas were higher or lower. My main focus was the geographic studies, and most of their geographic studies were actually high quality. Although they looked at several different countries, my focus was obviously the United States. 18 out of 19 of the geographic areas proved that there was a high proportion of low-income or ethnic residents that were underserved by food retailers compared with more advantaged areas. The evidence on rural and urban differences was sort of mixed, so the main focus was on lower income areas in the city. Low-income areas and areas with a high proportion of minorities also had fewer supermarkets or large chain stores such as Walmart, Kroger, stores like that. There was also a distance to supermarkets was farther for those living in those low-income and minority areas than for people in better areas and better neighborhoods. So the conclusion from their results was food deserts do in fact exist in the US, and enough evidence is can conclude that residents in low-income and minority areas have less access to food. There are also several reasons why these people in these low-income and minority areas have trouble accessing healthy foods and keeping up with a healthy diet. Neighborhoods have more high-calorie exposure in convenience stores and fast food restaurants. They also have a high cost of healthy foods. So most of these people in these areas have low income, obviously, and their rent, their credit card payments, their light bills, all of these different things that they're having to pay are usually more of a priority than healthy foods and having and maintaining a healthy diet. Also, it's difficult because most of the fresh foods that we eat for a healthy diet have a limited lifespan, and it's much easier for these residents to go and purchase frozen foods that they can keep for weeks at a time instead of having to go to the grocery store weekly to buy healthy foods like bananas and apples and things like that. It's also difficult for them because family members' food preference is different. So there are several children out there that don't like to eat vegetables, and their parents are not going to waste money to buy food for themselves when their kids aren't going to eat something. So cost of healthy foods is pretty difficult. Another reason why they have such a hard time is no access to a vehicle. In order to reach healthier food stores outside of their area, they obviously need a way to get there, and if they don't have a car, there's no way that they can leave their immediate neighborhood. And then this slide just shows several maps. I know it's kind of difficult to see, but this first one is actually a map of food deserts. And this is from the United States Department of Agriculture. USDA does a lot of research on food deserts. So this first one just shows low-income households that are more than 1 mile from a grocery store. And obviously, most of these problems are within the South. The next one is a health indicator for obesity. And obviously, the white areas over here are less than 12% of the residents are obese, while the highest is 44%, and it's also in the lower areas of the southern states. And then the next one is car-free households, which are more than 1 mile from a grocery store, which kind of goes along with the low income. Both of these maps are very similar. And then the last one is also another health indicator for diabetes. And just like the obesity, diabetes is also in the South. So although food deserts is still widely debated, there's been tons of research and maps with health issues and income issues and minority issues all have a similar pattern. And you can see that from the maps. I know it's kind of small, but obviously food deserts do exist, and health problems have been stemming from these, and low income and vehicle access as well is an issue. So there we go.